Hello and welcome to the street. So this series is going to be a study on the arm muscles. I've already put it in the description, but uh, I'm just gonna, like I said, I'm gonna go for it, having fun as much as this is gonna be like a study for me to, go over a lot of the musculature so that it's easier for me to form their forms. And for me, the way how I see studying the origins and insertions, or at least like I guess like revisiting them for me, is because to me, when it comes down to sculpting, the skin is a lot like it's a similar approach to clothes. Like whenever you are doing cloth sculpting, you have to keep in mind the form underneath the cloth, right? And of course you can do like sims using like Marvel's Designer and stuff like that, which kind of like fast tracks and jumps over a lot of the primary and secondary forms, or most of the secondary forms at least. When it comes down to muscles, once you understand the actions of the muscles and which muscles can be antagonistic to the other, or even like I said, the origins and insertions, the the idea of gestural sculpting becomes more like a puzzle than having to look at reference all the time, which you always still will have to look at reference so that it still looks decent, at least like believable. But I guess it'll take some time, uh, and yeah, that's kind of like where I'm at, after like almost like a year of just not sculpting and getting back into things. It's very interesting how much you kind of just lose. But I think I'm gonna have a lot of fun doing this because again, like it's me revisiting, massage therapy and studying the muscles and how they move and how to fix them, all that kind of stuff using massage. It's actually pretty cool. Gotta do that for Beyonce. And I'm not lying about the rambling. But anyways, today, I have this here, the bones here, and this is gonna be like part of the study for me. I think they are pretty low poly, which I think is actually not. I can bring them up a little bit. And this is mostly fine for me. Um, and the reason why is because I want to essentially use these as like the foundation for the muscles. I'm going to be building out each of the muscles, and I actually found reference here at this place called Ken Hub. I don't have a subscription, so I'm just like taking the images off and writing. I'm going to be writing down the names of the muscles because I am going to be doing the hands too. Just keeping the musculature in mind, and then even the forms. So I'm not going to have to worry about these cuneiforms. There's actually just a lot of ligaments. Well, you can see it here. There's a lot of ligaments that just keeping these connected. It's in where you see like with the hand too. It's pretty cool. Well, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and get started on that. Let me see if I can somehow also open up YouTube so I can actually like see any comments. So I am 100% gonna be yapping almost this whole time. Okay. Alright, so I'm just gonna be dragging the reference that I found. And then afterwards I'll be naming things. And as I go, I'll just be moving on, probably like talking about the actions because it's pretty self-explanatory. Like understanding anatomy is a bit like it's a bit like learning a different language. Like once you do learn it, you do have to, and you lose it, like I did. Oh my god, I keep mentioning that. You do have to get back on it. It's almost like a bike, like you just have to just do it. It'll come back. So I've also included the scapula because there are like a lot of muscles that actually connect around this area, even like the coracobrachialis, which is the coracoid process that it originates from, that it inserts almost like the medial side of medial. Also, okay, so coracoid is usually like a process. Like most bones will have processes that like project out or jut out in some ways, like this one right here. Um, and medial means like inner, so like anything that's close to the center of the body, and lateral means anything that's pointed outwards. Distal usually means away from the center of the body, and proximal usually means closer to the center. So I'll probably unconsciously say those things because it's easier to, because the body's always moving around. So in regards to anatomical positioning, which this one is almost anatomical position. Anatomical position would be like your palms are facing, like the palms would be facing this way to the right. That would be anatomically correct position. Um, and using those terms actually it just makes it a bit easier to know which part of the muscle I'm talking about, for me at least. So let me doing that. Let me just do this. You know what? I think I'll reorganize these in a proper way that actually makes sense, because the cuts are not. And you'll notice, like, as you go through the different muscles, I don't even know if this one's going to be important, so I'm not going to save this. That's a really, some of these are like really deep muscles that legitimately you won't see them. And they won't really influence too much. Like it does and it doesn't, you know? I was trying to do this before the stream, but, you know, it's always good to just see the entire process rather than just the one. Okay. And to be clear, I have the site on the side here, but there's like a timer that I didn't notice. I was actually going to just bring these over and just name them. So we have the deltoid muscle. There's actually 3 parts of this muscle. Deltoid. And the thing about the deltoid is that, let me just bring this over here. Just organize this. So the thing about the deltoid is that it actually has 3 parts to it, as the anterior, which is the front, posterior, which is the back, and the medial, or the middle, which is the middle. And each part it inserts on different parts it inserts on the pretty much like the middle of the humerus, essentially, but the origins on different parts, like you can see part of this is like on the spine of the scapula, and then there's the acromion process too. But then the anterior delt, which doesn't seem like it actually shows reference for the anterior delt. Oh, it does here. It's the latter third of the clavicle. That's where the anterior deltoid it originates. So they all, you know, insert generally in the same position. I wish there was like a lateral side view that I could show you guys, but yeah. No. Anyways, okay, so let's get to this. Okay, so this is the supraspinatus, I'm pretty sure. Okay, yeah, it is. Supraspinatus. Which arguably, you know what, for study purposes, I'm going to do it. Supraspinatus. Unlike the other, like the hands, the other one that I deleted, I don't know if it's, I guess it'd be good to know, but I don't think it'd be useful. This is the infraspinatus. I think this is the muscle that actually gets seen. You can see over here you have the teres. I think this is the minor and then the major. They actually they originate on the back of the scapula here on the I think it's fossa, something fossa. and it inserts onto the head of the humerus and different parts of the head. So the head, oh man, the head, it has so many insertions, and this is why I keep saying that like the hips or like the greater trochanter and the hips and like those origins and insertions, it's almost similar. Like like I said, the coracobrachialis is very similar to the adductors, but there's only just the one. But anyways, you have the teres major, which originates back here, like right here, and it inserts right. I think it's like on one of these lines. I think it's this line, because you just have to keep in mind that the pecs also insert here, and so does I think the lats, which we won't have to worry about because that's not next. Infras spinatus. Okay. These bad boys, teres major. I used to always confuse these because in reference, it would always seem like this one was the major one, but that's the minor. This is, teres minor. Super. So this is I think it's important to know the actions of some of these muscles because it'll help get an idea of like when you see gestures of which muscles are doing what, and that can influence that can ultimately influence these. All of these are like different size. It can influence how you understand which muscles are being like pushed out, like because like I said, it's like the skin functions almost like clothes, which is a very strange thing to say, but like but if you understand the underlying forms, it just makes it a bit easier. At least for me. And then you have the brachialis. And the coracobrachialis. Oh, it's not triceps then. Okay. Triceps. Okay, so this doesn't show the insertions, so I'm gonna have to. Showing the insertion. So I'm gonna have to actually look reference or something. Triceps. The popular brachioradialis muscle that I always have trouble with. Brachialis. So this is a muscle group. Okay, so I think it did it twice. There's two muscle groups that it just groups together, but I want individual muscles. So we have here pronator teres. And you know, one thing I might do also is actually I probably will know this. Is Radialis um, is sculpt a little bit more on some of these bones because these that I have here, they're not as defined, so it could be a bit tougher. Yeah, they're not as defined. I might actually split these and tough as this. It's just being triangulated. It just looks so. That's fine. I'll just leave it as is. Okay, next muscle palmaris longus, which is this one. And a lot of these muscle groups are actually really straightforward as far as like what they do, because you can just look at the insertion and even the name and understand what exactly it's doing. Carpi ulnaris. So flexor carpi ulnaris, it flexes the ulna, or just the wrist really. So think how do you put it? Like somebody saying go. Okay, I can't articulate what's happening, but think of it like flexing the wrist, turning this way, like side to like to the medial flexion. Okay, that's something. Okay, so some of these are just muscle groups instead of individual groups. Pronator quadratus. I don't think that's gonna be seen. So, you know, let me keep that in mind. Let me get rid of this then. This. I think these are fine because these are like these are the extensor groups. This is the flexor group, and I think this is the flexor group too. But they're all like you can see the individual muscles. They're all grouped, so I'm not gonna get them. And this is why learning the muscles in the forearm and the lower leg were so hard because of how long the names were. Flexor, carpi, radialis, longus, extensor, carpi, ulnaris. Extensor digitorum. You know, I actually have a notebook, Anatomy for Sculptors. That's something that I'm going to look at when I'm trying to really, how do you put it, get the look right. So it doesn't look like I'm just putting muscles together. Getting the muscles to actually, okay, we have them here. Okay, so I'm gonna have to think this is good for the more detailed version of those muscles. I'm gonna get, I think this is the thenar, hypothenar eminence, I think. Oh no, it's just the thenar muscles. Okay. Oh, the hypothenar is this one. I'll keep, I don't know. I guess I'll keep these here just for like some visual reference. Okay, next on the list, okay, let me just make sure these are all the muscle groups that I want to study. Minor, major, spinatus. That's this muscle here that's underneath the biceps. I mean the deltoids. Triceps brachii. I gotta look at the insertions for the origins and insertions for that. And you can see part of the biceps. It's actually on the coracoid process as well. I'd have to look at a posterior view of the brachioradialis, which I'm seeing here. And there's the anconius as well. That isn't here. And the anconius is such a weird muscle, specifically because of the fact that we don't technically use it. Good reference. Well, I might subscribe to the site. The quizzes and everything. Ah, there we go. Anconius. It says like it's for like stabilization, but it's not really much. I think this is the spot where, like, you know, like if you hit it, like people go, oh, I hit my elbow, and then you like feel like they say it's like your funny bone that you hit. I think it's the anconius. I think there's like a radial nerve that goes through it. I think it was like something. I forgot. Okay, so is there anything else that I need to cover? Okay, so outside of this, the next thing I want to do is get reference of an arm. Like I'm finding cadaver reference, which is good, but I don't know if I want to show that on YouTube. I'm trying to find a relaxed reference. I think one thing that I fell into a trap of was constantly sculpting for sure, but always sculpting with like as if the person is just flexing all the time. You know, that's not that's not the direction I want to go right now. Okay, I'm just trying to find some. Jesus Christ, it's so hard to find art. This looks pretty decent for like a side view at least. Okay, I'll take these as like visuals. Alright. So now we're gonna start with the scapula. So inner, teres major. How do I do this again? Ah, there we go. It was the extract. That. I'm just gonna zoom in much real quick. So teres major insert somewhere here. But you know what? I should be precise with this for now. So I'm going to look it up real quick. Teres major insertion and origin. So the posterior surface of the inferior angle of the scapula, which is like right here, as you can see in this image, and then it inserts into the medial lip of the intertubercular groove, occipital groove, which is on this, it's like right here, like this. there's like a bunch of grooves actually, like a lot of them that go like this, and the different muscles insert on different parts of those grooves. So in our case, it's gonna be like right here. Then I'm just gonna dynamesh this. Just gonna dynamesh really quick. Before I even start, I'm just gonna dynamesh and quickly place where these muscles should be. And of course, like when it gets to that insertion part, it's just gonna be a bit thinner. The insertion. And the origins too. Well, depends. Really depends. Curve. Just like that. Makes sense. Do that. And there we go. So now, because there has to be room for like other muscles to. Anyways, so let's go ahead and do the other muscle, which is the teres minor, and you can see that it originates. Well, I can see the origin and insertion there, but I'm gonna go ahead and be specific. So insertion. So it originates the superior 2/3 of the posterior surface of the lateral border of the scapula, which is, so if we're thinking 2/3, again, you're just cutting it. The superior, so again, higher, higher up, so superior would be up here, and then 2/3 would be like around here. The posterior, which is back, and the lateral, which would be the side. And it says border, so usually that would probably be like right here. I'm not sure why on this it's like, so it'd be like right here. Maybe like kind of this, like this. Well, probably like where this bump is, this groove is. And, I'm looking at the images too, just to be sure. There we go. And then it originates. It inserts. Interior facet of the greater tubercle of the humerus, which is, so there's like, usually this is pretty bumpy, but in this case, this would probably be like right here. Right here. And all muscles, they're gonna have like a belly, because like towards, okay, so you can see that white stuff. Those are like the ligaments. Tendon, and like the tendon part of it. The tendon part of it is actually gonna be pretty much just like what connects it to the muscle itself, whereas the belly of the muscle, which is the red, this fibrous part, that's going to be where, most of that action is going to happen. Okay, so anyways, let's keep it going. Let's see. Now I want to do the infraspinatus. So it originates from the infraspinatus fossa of the scapula, the medial 2/3. So again, medial is going to be like right here. So it's like this. And then it inserts into the middle facet of the greater tubercle. So middle facet, so like right here. So let's go ahead and extract, accept, get this, and bring this out towards there. So it's inserting here. Let's do this. Kind of like underneath this too, so similar to the, I think it was the supraspinatus, which is like up here, and it kind of like connects to the head of the humerus, but like over here, and it helps with um, lateral flexion, which is like moving to the side enough. It just helps with that along with the deltoids. Just like a supportive muscle. Muscles are pretty supportive of each other, although they can be antagonists sometimes. And this can be seen peeking underneath. Well, not seen, but if you are looking at it in a medical setting. Okay. Don't worry about fixing it for probably like next stream. Because this for now for me is just going to be like lacing the muscles, primarily focused on doing that. Okay, so next would be the deltoids, which I think I'm going to get to after I do these. So let's go ahead and get the brachialis, which is kind of like the soleus underneath the gastrocs. It originates, okay, let's do that. So brachialis. So it originates from the distal half of the anterior humerus. And again, an anatomical position would be, this is, like the humerus is anatomically correct, but I think they're kind of pronating, or at least this one is kind of like pronating, medial pronation. Well, actually, we can only pronate or supinate. There's no... Anyway, so I'm just going to assume it's like right here, what it means. Like this groove that you're seeing, it's like this right here. So let's see. Okay, so again, originates from the distal half of the anterior and the medial lateral intermuscular septa, which is like, man, if this was detailed, it'd be easier. So I know it's, so distal half would be like right here. So furthest point, so distal is always going away from the center. So right here would be like where that's inserting. I mean, originating. And it's a bit like a, let me just do that. And extracting accept. So yes, it goes down. So now we talk about insert the coronoid process of the ulnar tuberosity, which, because it's turning, I think that's going to be like right here. Right here. That's where that inserts. So it is turning. So it's going to be like and you know, it is a bit like a belly as well, so the center of it is kind of like pulled out a little bit. Well, you can see that in the reference too, but it's a bit of a belly. And although it is underneath the biceps, it kind of supports that too, you know, the biceps. Let's do this. I could do like a inflate. Then after that, we have the biceps brachii, and this has like it's a weird one. Like the insertion is on, I believe it's definitely on the ulna, but it's also, no, it's on the radius, but it's also, oh, it's not showing it here, but maybe I could see it in the bigger reference over here. Oh, no, it's not. Okay. maybe I can find an image. Hold on. Biceps brachii. Insertion origin. So if I go to the images, let's see. No, that's, yeah, it's definitely on the radius, but there's another insertion. Why is it not showing up? Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was wrong. It wasn't like a secondary insertion, but there is like a flat sheet of like tendon, which, uh, and it kind of like, it doesn't insert on a bone. It just blends with the fascia of the forearm. So, and the fascia would be like another layer above, that's like over the muscle, and like fascia is basically what starts to give, it's not your skin exactly that kind of gives you the form, like these forms that we're seeing is actually the fascia, which is another sublayer of the skin. Here, I'll just Google so you can get a visual fascia of arm and forearm. Hello, Midnight. That gives like a, not a non-creepy representation. Because at this point, when I start talking fascia, now there's a lot more cadavers. I'm just trying to find a drawn version of it. And understanding, like, well, I guess it gets a bit deep, but a lot of understanding the fascia makes it easier to understand where there would be points of tension underneath the skin, like which parts would be tighter. Like, I mean, we already know, like, a lot of the bones that you can see is because there isn't a lot of muscle. Instead, there's just fascia. So the fascia is kind of like saran wrap in a way. Not, I mean, the skin is too, but it's the fascia that's really keeping everything together. Okay, well, I guess this will be the best example. That doesn't look crazy. So like that light blue is essentially like the fascia. You can see, I mean, it's all over the body. It's also why it's important to stretch, not just for the muscles, but so that the fascia doesn't tighten up over time. Because as we age, we like, how do you put it? It's harder to hydrate, the body. That's why it's also good to drink water. And as we get older, especially if you don't stretch, oh man, it becomes so much harder. It's like you kind of, you dry up almost. Like, because you're not using or stretching or using those parts of the body, it becomes harder to use those parts over time. So stay active if you want to be able to use your body as you get older. So anyways, okay, so technically this is the major origin, but this right here that you see is actually part of the long head, which is the longer part of the biceps brachii, and it also kind of, wait, no, it doesn't insert there. Yeah, it does on the coracoid process, and then also the supralinoid cervical of the scapula, which is kind of like, whoa, okay. Where is that? That's not. Let me search it because I don't want to give the wrong information. Search images. Okay, yeah, okay. So here is the different bony parts. Because each of these parts, they have different, anyways. So this is medial view of, no, this is a lateral view of, wait, is it? Lateral. No, it's the medial. What? I see the glenoid cavity, so that would be the medial. But this is clinical process. This is just the left. I mean the right. Okay, yeah, it is. Okay, I was like fucking good there. But anyways, okay, so yeah, it is here. That's what I was thinking, but I just didn't want to give the wrong information because I thought it could have been like connected, like the way I would see here. It might look like it is. But anyways, let's go ahead and do that now. Okay, so biceps breaking. So this is gonna be, I'm just gonna do something here, and then I'll just here, and this one, kind of like, there's like a ridge here. It's not, you can't really see it too well over here, but there is a ridge. Let me actually start with Dynameshing. So this one, it's kind of like a band. Oh, well, you can see it in the reference too. Like, see, I have to change that habit of mine of not looking at reference as often as I should, even when it's right in front of me. And then now this one, it inserts on the radial tuberosity, so that's actually, yeah, it's pretty apparent. It's like right here. This is the tuberosity. So tuberosities are usually like just protrusions or processes as well. Well, processes would be like the end of the bone, but tubercles are just like bumps on the body of the bone itself. Like up here, you can have tubercles. Like this, technically, it's yes, but it would be a bit harsher as far as like how it turns because of those the insertions. Otherwise, it's like it's harder to tell where those insertions would be. Like this, it's actually, I'll zoom a bit more like this. And generally, it's like flat, but some of the bones are good, but they're generalizations. That insertion. So again, like I said, this one technically has two. I mean, I guess it depends. But this one, I'm gonna just pull it out for now. But it blends into the rest of the, like it looks like it blends into the side of the muscle, like the medial side, but it blends into the fascia, and that's what I was like mixing up. Again, like this is as much of a review for me as it is for whoever's watching. So let's go ahead. And what I'm gonna do actually is let's focus. It's a bit easier to. just a bit easier for me to get these properly formed, if that makes sense. Because this does kind of looks a bit like it sneaks behind one of the heads, but I'm just trying to keep in mind that it has its own insertion. I mean origin. So because of that, it is gonna stand out a bit more. Let's just do that. Okay, I'm starting to get green there. Just keep that in mind, you know, like these muscles aren't like going through each other either, you know, they're almost working together. I mean, sorry, they're overlapping with each other as well. Just keep that in mind too. I'll leave this as is for now. Okay, and I might just put it back together. Just so I only had to separate it so it had was on its own. Okay. I'll just leave that for now. Okay. Next. Okay, next would be I did brachialis. Let's do it's not here. Should be here though. This muscle right here, coracobrachialis. This one I did it. Included that. But again, this one inserts a little bit lower than the brachialis, but it originates on the coracoid process. Let's just coracobrachialis. let's see. Inserts on the medial surface of the middle third of the humeral shaft. That. So we just split it into thirds. In the middle third should be like right here. Let's see. Middle third of the humeral shaft, medial surface. So medial. Okay, yeah, like right here. That's where the inserts, and it originates up here. So go ahead and extract. A little bit and start moving. And this is kind of like the adductor. An adduction is it's, you know, you're pulling your legs in to the side, or adduction is moving the arms inwards, like bringing them to your side, essentially. Now for this, that is tendon 3, 4, belly. See, and for me, my biggest thing, like I said, is battling perfection. Doesn't have to be perfect, just has to be there. And it originates a little bit underneath, I know that for sure. And then the triceps, which I don't want to do yet because it has its own set of insertions and organs too. Triceps. So infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula. Now let me look exactly where that is. Okay, yep, it's underneath. So before we had this originating on the supraglenoid. Now this one, it inserts on the infraglenoid tubercle, which is like this right here. So that's one. And then the lateral head originates posterior surface of the humerus, superior to the radial groove, which is, I know this is the radial groove, and I know, so superior to the radial groove would probably be, is this really it? No. Because there's 3 different insertions, so let me make sure. So radial groove, search that. Let me just show this so you can see what I'm looking at. So radial groove, it's right here. Whoa, superior of the, so it should be up here probably. Where the radial groove is. Okay. So I can't really see it here because it's not as defined, but that would be this right here, that groove. I'm just going to do that here just so I can see it. So it'll be like right here where it originates here. So I think for this, what I'm going to have to do is just do one big body. Because if you look at the medial head, posterior surface of the humerus, inferior to the radial groove. So this one is just like right, the origin of the medial, because this has three heads. The origin of the medial head will be right underneath the lateral head, and the long head's going to be inserted there. So I'm going to go ahead and extract, accept. And we're going to start, because it goes like through these muscles right here. It goes through it. You can actually see it here. And it goes through the teres muscles, the long head, and the lateral. It's right here. And the medial is right underneath that. Because you see it right here. It's a medial head too. And it kind of does play a role in how, like, some people can develop it a bit more. And again, you know, like I said, like, everybody's body is different, so it's very hard to essentially use like, anatomy in and of itself is the blueprint, you know, but everybody's a little different. So that's where that would be inserted. Oops. That's where that would be inserted, and this would be inserted here. Of course, we're going to have a third head. See, like, unconsciously, I was just trying to, like, make it super big, like, superhero big. Again. And I'm cutting this side because the muscles are pretty flat. Let me just give this a bit more resolution. And I'm debating if I should separate this and then combine it again later. I think I will. And then the insertion is it. So again, similar. Well, I guess it's not entirely the same, but similar to the gastrocs, where you have your hamstring, that it kind of like, instead of it inserting into a tendon that's directly attached to the bone, it actually turns into essentially like fascia. Like it blends into fascia, and then that is what inserts into, you know, whichever. So in this case, it's the olecranon process of the ulna. That's where that would be inserted, which is like right here. Let's do that. And a lot of that fat and stuff. So there's something that I need to clarify for myself just to make sure. Because there is a bit of muscle that's separating, and I think that might be the medial. Okay, I already answered my own question. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this and move this one to insert here underneath, and just bring that back. So it's kind of like its own insertion here. And it's blending into the fascia instead of, you know, attaching as a tendon. stuff, I can always like add that over time. So I do know this. It's kind of the same thing. Inserts over here, but blends along the side. Of course, these muscles, they protrude out from the side, so I'll get to that once I get to that part. So you have those three heads, basically. Okay, and I think I'll do the anconus. Originating from the posterior aspect of the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. So, epicondyle of the humerus. So, humerus, these are epicondyles, these protrusions out here, and it'll be the posterior aspect. So, and it's not saying distal, so posterior would probably be like right here. Probably just look at the images, but I don't know. It's kind of fun just looking at the insertions and origins. Okay, so insertion, so that's the origin, and then the insertion would be the lateral surface of the olecranon and the upper fourth of the posterior surface of the ulna. So this is the olecranon. Ulna. Okay. I got confused for a second. Like, huh? And the this is just the olecranon process of the ulna. This is the radius. So a good rule of thumb for like the radius is like the olecranon isn't that's like the muscle that isn't exactly going to, I mean the bone that isn't exactly going to be the one that like shifts, rotates, does the supination and pronation and stuff like that. Let's see. Okay, well, you can tell here by this endpoint, like it looks like something that can rotate rather than a hinge joint, which like you can see the olecranon where there's like a bit of a fossa here in the humerus, and it leaves enough space for the olecranon to do its like its bending, because this is a hinge joint. It can only bend. Kind of like the connection here between the ulna and the humerus, it's more of a hinge, and the connection between the radius and the humerus is something that helps it do its rotation. So you're going to see whenever it rotates, this is essentially what's turning the most, and it's turning over. So here, if I do let me just open this so you can see everything as well. So if I do pronation of the radius, well, you can see it here. Like the radius is what's turning over. The ulna is moving, but not as much as there isn't as much of a change as the radius. But this is something that is important to keep in mind, especially when you want to think about the different actions of the arm, because I think for me, again, like I have to really delve deeper into these studies and really solidify them again. But like it'll help you when it comes down to knowing how the muscles look, because again, I think people always say like the hands and the feet are like pretty hard to do, but for me, um, it's always been the forearm, the not so much the lower leg, but yeah, it's always been the forearm and the hips for me, because that's where like there's a lot of movement going on, and the muscles change quite a bit. Like this is kind of complex, but like once you understand the movement of things, it makes it easier, and which muscles control which movement, it makes it a bit easier down the line. But this one, God, there's just so many different. That's why even in this, they just group them up because there's just so many. And you can even see here, like flexor carpi radialis muscle, flexor carpi lunaris, palmaris muscle. Like, it gets a bit confusing. And then now you have to take into the fact that this has a weird pronation supination movement. You have to keep in mind which originates where. I mean, obviously there are easier ways to think about it. Like, they've already blocked this to the point where, like I think this is post anterior side. So like anterior, so you're looking at flexion muscles, and you would think of it as a flexion group, which is great. I think maybe it just depends on like how far or interested in it you are, but I guess for me, I think about it as separate groups because, or I like to think about the separate groups because, say the hand is, or the fingers are doing like specific movements and stuff, and that way you can know, even if the arm is pronated, you can get an idea of like which muscles are going to be like changing the form of the forearm rather than relying on just giant muscle groups, which is perfectly okay, but I don't know. I guess I'm too interested in the granular approach to these kinds of things. Anyways, let me get back to the Anconius. So origin here and insertion on the olecranon and where was it? Posterior surface of the ulna, so behind. So probably like over here. That's what it looks like. So, is there a way to like bridge? So I do have ZBrush 2022. I kind of refuse to get like a subscription model. Let's see. Oh, or maybe in the mask. Okay, so bridge to mask points and brush. There he is. Together so you can see where I'm actually getting it from. I don't know if this is actually what I want to do though. That's definitely not what I want to do. That's cool. It's like doing the Boolean operation in a way. Guess there's a brush for that. Bridge. Curve bridge. Interesting. Anyways, let's just do this way. Drag, accept, move, send this back up here. Let's maybe to this point. Here. And this is actually a really thin, I mean, all muscles are actually very thin. I always say it just looked like, again, just to reiterate, I have gone to a cadaver as part of my massage therapy studies. Not some finding, whatever. But the muscles are a lot thinner than they seem. And practicing how to get them thin, I think is a good practice to do. Just, I think. So, okay, so anyways, let's get back to the rest of this. What am I missing up here? The crackobrachialis, oh, the deltoids. Spinatus, teres major, minor, triceps brachii, biceps, well, not yet. Now we get the deltoid. So now if we go to the deltoid, I'm trying to find relaxed reference, but having the most trouble. Like you can find ZBrush or like you can find sculpts or 2D things, but there's deltoid. Oh God, no. So the origin is located on the lateral third of the clavicle, anteriorly. And this is what I meant about like, there's 3 different groups as far as the delta. Like it's one big muscle group, but when you understand the 3 different groups, it makes it a little bit easier to, okay. See there's 3 different parts, like the middle head. And because each of the 3 parts do different things. So if, you know, like in that reference I was just doing where he's like driving the ball forward, you can see that like the humerus is kind of like laterally, just doing some lateral flexion, but it's also being pulled back, so it's going a bit posterior. So you can tell because of that, knowing these, the actions of the muscle and like the origin and insertion, you can decide where you're putting that bump. As far as like, you know, how the belly goes, like where is that tension coming from? Because if I'm pulling, that muscle is now doing its action, so it's gonna be tighter, or it's gonna stretch if it's the antagonist, or like which is the antagonist of, you know, said muscle. So yeah, for me, I try to keep that in mind. It makes it pretty fun, you know, when you're making them, I think. So that's kind of like how I'm gonna do it. I'm going to keep in mind, oh shoot, did I X out the assault date? So I'm gonna keep that in mind. Deltoid, origin, insertion. So I'm gonna keep that in mind when I'm creating these. I'm gonna do them separately, not as one group. Actually no, I'll do it one group and then separate them. So I do know for this, it's like most of this spine, and then the acromion process, and then the other part of it is actually right here, and it's the lateral third of the clavicle, so like right here probably. And this is gonna look weird, but I'm gonna accept it. I'm going to DNT, so I'm going to topology, move these together. Side and essentially just bring it out. And okay, so now when we go, oof. So all the fibers, they do converge, and the insert is a deltoid to veracity, which would be, oops, like right here. Right here, I'll show you. So deltoid tuberosity, and see how it kind of like looks like it's closer to the center. If I were to split this mentally, like it's just close to the center. I generally put it to the center, but because everybody like it again, these are basic points where they should insert, but everybody's goes a bit differently. But yeah, it's like right here. Same with the bone. Like the bone itself could be smaller in size, but the tuberosity will, yeah. And you can even see it here. Like this actually looks closer to the center than it does on this image here. Even here, actually, the radial groove or the triceps, it actually goes up, and there's like a bit of a concave side here, and inserts where the triceps. I mean, the long head. I mean the other head, the lateral head. But yeah, deltoid tuberosity. That's where it inserts, and it's more on, like on these we're seeing the anterior and posterior view, but it's more on the lateral side. Like, see, this is deltoid tuberosity. It's like right here. That's what's covering the triceps. Part of the infraspinatus and teres muscles. Let's go ahead and complete this side of it. And so now as for anterior side, that is covering most of this too. Which, when we, well, I don't know, now I kind of want to do the whole body. I think I might just reinsert the rest of the bones, because this is from like the Rhine King. It's already included. Do I have it? No. Oh, I do. Okay. I think I might do. It's fun to read. This is interesting though. Oh yeah, this is a woman's body. That's probably why, but the hip should be. Oh yeah, that's okay. So I do have to keep that in mind that this is a woman's skeleton. So that means it's gonna the muscle. I mean, the muscles are gonna be the same essentially. It's just the bone structure changes how they present, if that makes sense. And if I'm not mistaken, I think does it cover it completely? It does. Did I exit out again? It did. Thank you. Okay, so deltoid anterior view. I want to see something really quickly. So it does insert. It does cover it completely. Okay, so it kind of, so it kind of covers it. I'm thinking about like the coracobrachialis, like how much of this muscle is actually covering up that area, and it's covering up most of it. So, yeah, if anything, this is actually a bit further. just like clothes, you're just thinking about, or yeah, I would say just like clothes, you're thinking about points of connection. How straight is that to the other side? So damn, I think I might do the whole skeleton. No, no, let me focus. I think what I'm gonna do, because I do have trouble with the chest every now and then. So I think what I'm gonna do. No, no, no. Let me not go back on my own word and stick with doing just this muscle group, just the arms. It's so hard not to continue doing the other parts. So this, like the origin, it's like a little bit under, like how do I say this? It's underneath this bone, like right underneath it, like right. And some of that's going to be shown, and that's usually what you see when you look at somebody's back and it's like clearly defined. You're like, damn, you be working out, brother or sister, and you can just see those cuts. I mean, they're probably dehydrated, but like, yeah, you typically be able to see that hard part. And I guess that's what you would call the there's like the parts you want to. Oh, I'm blanking, but that's connected here. Kind of wraps over. This goes underneath there. You can see how some of these are starting to form where they should, or at least like you're starting to get a bit of a look-see on how. Well, anyways, it's coming together. Okay. And now we can move on to the other part. Huh. Let me double check brachialis really quickly. Distal how, yeah, it's on the anterior side. Coronary process and tuberosity of the ulna. Okay, so my insertion was wrong. Coronary process of the ulna and tuberosity. Okay, so this should be like right here instead. And that's probably why. That's interesting. Because there's. Okay, maybe up here. Let's see. Like it's showing that it's. Huh. Hmm. Oh shoot, that's the radius one over here. Okay, so it was correct. Yeah, it was before. It's just a bit higher. It's on the two, yeah, there we go. On the tuberosity. The only thing that I'm confused about now is just how does this muscle... Maybe these muscles just need to be a bit thicker. So let me see the lateral fluid. Okay, so it okay, I see. So kind of like... kind of like okay, I see. So it kind of wraps around the humerus a bit. That's the humerus missing. So it wraps around a bit like this. But that's weird. Like, is it directly below the tubercle? Process like right here, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. Like how? Okay, I see. Okay. So now it's resting here, and essentially wrapping over here. Okay, there we go. Like, there's no way. Just didn't look like it was sitting properly in the muscle group. But it was. Probably like reset. Just get that. There we go. And then we would look at the anterior view. I just want to make sure. Okay. This side is just bulging out a bit, just a bit. So what was next? Okay, brachioradialis. So we got the top arm, now we're gonna get the forearm. So for this, it's gonna take a minute, but we'll get it done. Okay, so now I know that there's some supination, or I'm sorry, pronation going on with this arm. Essentially the arms are, the palms are facing the thigh. So that means, you know, seeing how this is inserting on the distal part of the radius, there's probably going to be some movement that we're going to see here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with looking for that origin and insertion. And I'm not going to put it anterior view. Originates from the proximal 2/3 of the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus and the lateral intermuscular septum. It inserts into the lateral surface of the styloid process of the radius. So the styloid process is going to be this. And that's going to be the thing that everybody kind of like sees. Where we know it's. Oh, okay, yeah. So styloid process. It would be here. I'm thinking pinky for some reason because there's also a process on that side. Anyway, so let's check that origin. So origin. Let's see, lateral. Look at this. lateral supracondylar ridge. This over here. Oh, I can see. Like this. Oh well, it's literally telling me right here. Yeah, it's like this right here. This is the lateral supracondylar ridge of the humerus, and that's gonna be which position is this? Okay, that's right. Posterior view. You can see how this is. It's a general. Look on it, but this is actually there's a bit more of a ridge here, and you can see it here too. Like this is where see the coronary fossa, and maybe if I don't see. I mean, this is important too, but the coracoid fossa is where the acromion process would bend into, and this right here, this I totally forgot the name. I'm this right here, trochlea capitulum, but that's gonna be what this like hinges on. This right here. Man, look at all these. So yeah, these are the epicondyles. You can see lateral, medial, epicondyle. But anyways, brachioradialis right here. That's where we're going, and that's gonna be right. So we have the deltoid tuberosity, which is a bit over the medial side, and this is going to be right here. So the start of this is going to be like right here of the ridge. So like right here. So I'm just going to do this. And also, I think I might need better image, like a posterior. There we go. Or actually, I think I have a posterior view right here. But use this. Let's minimize this. And the insertion was the ulna, the lateral surface of the styloid process of the radius. So in this case, it would be like right here, where it's because here I'll actually search it up so you can see as well. Styloid process of the radius. Distal end radius means the end. That's gonna be like this part right here. Styloid process. So it's gonna come from here. Again, it gets pretty thin on this side. Like, oh, you'll, I mean, as we do this, you'll notice that. But muscles on the forearm, pretty thick at the proximal half of the forearm, but they get pretty thin as you get lower and lower. So let's check this out. think I'll do that once I get to the sculptural part. From now, it's just going to be like a mass that is still connected. I know that's here. Because of the fact that there's pronation going on. And the highest point is going to be close to the epicondyle, lateral epicondyle. Let's try lateral view. Oh, how am I going to do that? Because then that depends. Actually, if it's an anatomical position, then that should be okay, right? Oh, okay, that's how. Okay, okay. My reference board is just adding stuff as I go. It's fun. I like searching up stuff anyhow. Okay, so we're getting to the pronator. We're getting to like about like 10 minutes left. But let's get this pronator teres in there. You know, this. If I'm not mistaken, the pronator teres actually covers um, the insertions of the brachialis and the biceps brachii, at least like the short head, whichever head this was. But let me double check. Because that layering is important too. So here, let's go back to the head. Let me just make sure. Okay, yes. Okay. So pronator teres, it does cover the insertions of the biceps brachii, and even that other head. See, right there it goes in, and it looks like it's connecting to that muscle. So I'm gonna grab this too as like a reference as well. So I think this is great, but there are other muscles that are important to think about too. And as I go and adding more of the muscle groups, you'll start to notice how helpful, at least in my opinion, helpful it can be to know what's inserted where and why. Okay, so it looks also like, okay, what was the insertion again? It was the flat tendon on the lateral surface of the radius at the middle of its shaft. So probably closer to right here. And the second head, maybe 150. Because this is kind of like inserting in here. This is kind of covering it. Again, a lot of these muscles are flat, so for now the brachialis is going to look like this, but maybe in the next stream I will progress, not perfection. Keep reminding myself that. I do know this gets slimmer sooner. This two. This two. The reason why is because this part would actually. Bit of a fan to the attachment rather than like a singular point. Sync this so closer to a fan attachment underneath. And this you can just flatten it a bit. This is just covering that. And it's also kind of like wrapping over that radial, that part of the radial radius bone. It's like wrapping over it. And this is there you go. Whoops, what did I do here? so we will continue tomorrow with just, blocking these in. And afterwards, I'll start to give them a bit more form. Um, so they're actually interacting with each other a bit more. And of course, I'll start from the base layers as well. Just so, yeah. And I think for this, when we get to this stage, it's hard to recommend cadavers, especially if you aren't an anatomist or, familiar with the more medical side of things, because it's a bit creepy, honestly. But cadavers are great ways to get an idea of like how the muscles are actually laid out underneath. And then once you get a good idea of that, again, like I said, like when we start getting into actions, then the idea of doing that would be pretty straightforward. And I don't know, this is just my approach. I've watched other people and learned from other people who, it's a lot easier to just group things together and just think about things in shapes rather than the actual muscle itself. And I say that's definitely a very extremely valid direction to go into, especially if you're not trying to melt your brain or anything like that. But it's a very valid direction to go into, because at the end of the day, it's like, it's not the most necessary thing if like people are just, as long as it looks believable. If it looks believable, then you just focus on the shapes. But for me, I don't know. I like the idea of it's kind of like I said, it's kind of like a puzzle for me, and that's the fun part. Sculpturally, it's just like it's like a puzzle. And it's just fun, getting gestures to look believable and sculpting and stuff like that. And that is what I want to do with this one. It's like once I get the muscles looking a bit better, closer to like the underneath, I'm gonna do like I'm just gonna blend everything together and then just sculpt over it to kind of get like that skin look, and then probably try to bring it home with detailing, because I was just looking at that Johannes stream that he did. It's like 4 very great videos. I'll link them at some point or reference them at some point, but they're very good for getting believable sculpts done inside of ZBrush. But thanks to anybody who's gotten this far. I hope that at least you learned something from this. Again, I'm gonna keep pushing forward with the anatomy studies, and for now it's gonna be the arm, and then I'll get to the torso. And I guess it'll be female anatomy because that's where the bones are from. But yeah, I hope this, like I said, I hope this helped. If you're interested in seeing more, definitely comment what you'd like to see more of, or anything that you'd like me to slow down or spend more time talking about. Definitely do that. And the same goes for anything that you'd like to see me work on. Anyways, thanks for watching. Y'all have yourselves a great week. Oh, lastly, the last thing about it was my scheduling. Honestly, I'm liking the Monday to Wednesday kind of thing, from 1 p.m. EST to 3 p.m. EST. That's working for me. I think I'm going to be like practicing on my own as well outside of that, because I am working on other projects. Like I am working on like state trees and Unreal Engine. I think that's a really interesting thing to really delve into. Like, as much as I've been learning a bit more about blueprints and rigging and stuff like that, I really like state trees. It's actually pretty fun. It reminds me, it's definitely coding. Like it's building on top of C++, which is very hard for me to wrap my head around still. But I really am liking state trees, and I'm looking forward to like learning how to blend that into the gas system, which is a pretty good system to use too. Which I'll probably have to learn the ins and outs of it and read through more documentation. But yeah, I'm just doing quite a bit. So for me, dedicating at least 2 hours a day, at least 3 days, some days out of the week where I'm revisiting my sculpture, and doing it for fun. Not doing it because X, Y, and Z. I'm doing it because it's fun. Well, actually, no, it's fun, but I also want to maintain those skills and get back on that bike of sculpting. Anyways, now see y'all later. Y'all have yourselves a great weekend, great week, and catch you on the next stream.